She thought no one was watching. But when a billionaire saw her kindness toward his disabled wife, her entire world changed in an instant. The dinner rush had just begun, and Sophie Evans barely had time to breathe. The small diner buzzed with chatter, plates clinking and the occasional shout from the kitchen. It was just another exhausting shift. She balanced a tray of steaming dishes, dodging a rowdy group of teenagers, when she noticed an elderly woman in the corner struggling with her meal. Her frail hands trembled as she tried to lift the spoon to her lips. Some of the soup spilled onto the table and her shoulders slumped. No one seemed to notice. Sophie did. Without hesitation, she set her tray down and hurried over. "Let me help you, Mum," she said softly. The woman looked up startled, then smiled. "Oh dear, I don't want to be a bother." Sophie shook her head. "It's no bother at all." She pulled up a chair and gently lifted the spoon, carefully feeding the woman, making sure she was comfortable. She didn't care if it slowed her down. She didn't care if it meant getting in trouble with her boss. What she didn't know was that someone was watching. In the farthest booth, a man in an expensive suit sat completely still. His sharp eyes, the eyes of a man who was used to being in control, were locked onto Sophie, because the woman she was helping was his wife, and Sophie had just unknowingly changed the course of her life. The moment Sophie walked away, Nathaniel Hayes set down his untouched coffee, his mind racing. His wife, Eleanor, had been battling a neurodegenerative disease for years. Once a strong, independent woman, she now struggled with even the simplest tasks, and yet no one ever helped. Not the high-end restaurant staff, not the well-paid caregivers, no one, until now. Nathaniel had spent his life surrounded by people who only cared about his money. But this waitress, she didn't know who he was, and she didn't care. She had helped simply because it was the right thing to do. He turned to Eleanor, who was smiling, genuinely smiling. "She was kind," Eleanor murmured, her voice weak but full of warmth. Nathaniel's chest tightened. "Yes," he agreed, "she was." He glanced at Sophie, who was now rushing to another table, balancing plates while dodging a customer's spilled drink. She worked hard with no complaints. Something inside him shifted. Nathaniel wasn't just grateful, he was intrigued. He took out his phone and typed a quick message to his assistant. Find out everything about the waitress at table 6. Because one thing was certain, this wasn't the last time he would be seeing Sophie Evans. Sophie barely had time to catch her breath as the dinner rush wore on. She had no idea that one act of kindness had just placed her at the center of a billionaire's attention. Nathaniel watched as she moved from table to table, offering tired smiles to customers who barely noticed her. She handled rude customers with patience, cleaned up messes without a word of complaint, and even slipped a free slice of pie to an elderly man who looked like he hadn't eaten all day. She had a good heart, and she had no idea someone was watching. His phone buzzed, a message from his assistant. Sophie Evans, 24 years old, no family nearby, works double shifts to pay off medical bills, none of them her own. Nathaniel's brow furrowed. Medical bills? He scrolled further. Her younger brother had been in an accident 2 years ago. The family lost everything trying to pay for his treatment. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. So that was why she worked herself to the bone. He looked at Eleanor, who was still smiling softly, a rare sight these days. "You like her," he murmured. Eleanor nodded. "She reminds me of someone." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "Who?" His wife chuckled weakly. "You, before the money." He stilled, her words hitting harder than he expected. Eleanor reached for his hand. "Help her," she whispered. Nathaniel met her gaze and saw the same determination that had built his empire. He turned back to Sophie. He had made life-changing deals in boardrooms, but tonight, the most important decision he would make was in this tiny diner, and Sophie had no idea that her life was about to change forever. As Sophie wiped down a table, exhausted but still smiling, she felt a presence beside her. She turned and nearly dropped her cloth when she saw the sharply dressed man from table 6, Nathaniel Hayes. She didn't know who he was, not yet, but his aura was different. He wasn't just another customer. "Excuse me," he said smoothly, his deep voice calm but commanding. "May I have a word?" Sophie hesitated. Had she done something wrong? Sure," she said, glancing around nervously. "Is something wrong with your order?" Nathaniel smiled slightly. "No, but there is something wrong with the situation." Sophie frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Nathaniel gestured toward a nearby table and pulled out a chair. "Sit." Sophie blinked. Sir, I'm still working. I own this restaurant, Nathaniel interrupted. She froze. You... what? Nathaniel leaned forward slightly, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. And I own a lot more than that, which means I have the power to change your life. Sophie's heart pounded. What was happening? I saw what you did for my wife tonight, Nathaniel continued. Most people overlook her, but you showed kindness when you thought no one was watching. Sophie shifted in her seat. I was just doing what anyone would do. Nathaniel shook his head. No, not anyone would do that. Eleanor, still sitting at the booth, smiled warmly at Sophie. He's right, dear. You're special. Sophie swallowed hard, still struggling to understand why these people, this powerful man, was even talking to her. Nathaniel took out a sleek black card and slid it across the table. This is my direct line. Starting tomorrow, you work for me. Sophie's eyes widened. What? You deserve better than this, Nathaniel said simply. So I'm giving you a new opportunity, a real career, a life where you don't have to struggle just to survive. Sophie stared at the card in disbelief. She had spent years working herself to exhaustion, believing that life would never be anything more than endless shifts and unpaid bills. And now, a billionaire was offering her a way out. She looked up at Nathaniel, searching for any sign that this was a joke. But his expression was serious. This was real. This was her second chance. And for the first time in a long time, Sophie let herself believe in something bigger.